Today, I've got Shiv Singh joining me on the show. He's the founder of Emerge Management Consulting, a UK-based firm delivering high-impact strategy and design services to small and medium businesses. He shares his personal journey through the corporate world and why he knew it was important to leave, to take a leap, and start his own business. We dive into what it's like to challenge societal expectations, how to approach major career shifts, especially into entrepreneurship, and what knowledge workers need to understand about mental health. Shiv is one of the most genuine and warm-hearted individuals I've met online. I know you'll enjoy this conversation with him. Welcome to the Rising Digital Leaders Show. I am your host, Matthew Doan. Today's organizations are powered by digital capabilities, cloud, data science, cybersecurity, and much more. To be competitive, we must have tech-savvy leaders steering the ships. But these people don't come out of thin air. We must develop them. This show is for the technical experts of the world, those brave souls that feel unheard and lost in the crowd, but know they were born to lead. We need you to rise, to become impactful digital leaders. In these episodes, we help you undergo a self-transformation, developing the mindset and skill set that'll massively enhance your abilities, influence, and career potential. We take a different approach, pulling in lessons from philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, and history to enrich the professional and personal aspects of your life. Thank you for your time. Please subscribe to the Rising Digital Leaders Show. Now, let's dig in. Hey Shiv, welcome to the Rising Digital Leaders Show.
Hey Matt, I'm very excited to be here and have a good conversation with you.
Oh, it's going to be so much fun. And I know our audience is going to love hearing from you. So to dive right in, we've had a few conversations between you and me. You've mentioned this idea of living your life through these ideas of pillars of life. Can you explain how you apply that concept to your world?
Yeah, sure. So I think growing up in my world and when I joined my consulting career, I was constantly thinking about work, career, how do I develop, how do I progress? And fast forward a few years into my career, a few things were going on in my life. And I took a step back and I thought, well, hang on a second, why am I focusing so much energy on one aspect of my life? And then it made me question, what are the other aspects of my life as well? So through that experience, I took a step back and I said, right, actually, if I had to put this on I've got 10 fingers, what are the different aspects of my life? So for me personally, and I think it varies for every single person, for me, the aspects of my life are spirituality, family, relationships, friends, work and career being one of them, business and money, my brain and learning, health and body, and hobbies. So I have 9. I don't use all 10. I've got one spare that I can use in the future, but I've got 9 different aspects of my career. And for me personally, what I realized was I'm putting 80-90% of my energy into just one of those aspects. So how I apply that now is each week and each month when I set objectives for myself and when I take a step back and do a weekly reflection and a deep monthly reflection, I try to assess those different pillars of my life in different aspects and score each of those. And surely enough, at the beginning of doing this exercise, I realized my business and career side was always scoring high in terms of effort, energy, outcome, but other things were lacking, friends and family, perhaps health, other areas. So by assessing each of those different aspects individually now, I'm forced to think of objectives for each, but really honestly assess how am I performing in each as well. And it forces me to have a more balanced outlook on life now. So yeah, it took me a while to get there, but now that's my kind of circular wheel, if you will, of 9 different pillars.
Yeah, I love that. I imagine there's an internal meter that says when one of them is off or a couple of them need attention. Do you find a way to then explore that and then redirect energy there?
You have to. I think you mentioned the key word there, which is energy. And at a macro level, this conversation right now and our relationship with people is an exchange of energy. So I think as we have these conversations with one another and we recharge and you feel energized, it's important to then look inside and actually think, I'm gaining energy from others, I'm giving energy for others, but how is my energy within? Take a stock take of yourself, right? And just say, how am I feeling within? And then when you assess your energy in those different pillars, you can feel, right, I feel a bit deflated in this area. So for example, in lockdown, I think naturally we were all maybe putting on a bit of lockdown weight. Well, some of us were. I was one of them. And I realized that, okay, so when it comes to health and physical side, I'm starting to really lack in that area. And I had just set up my business and left my corporate career, and I'm putting all my energy into there. But there's a real imbalance there. So yes, you may be successful in one area, but overall success is energy and balance across the board. So I think it starts by taking an inward reflection with yourself and honestly assessing how is your energy across those different areas. But you have to be honest with yourself. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, that's a very mature evolution that a lot of people take time to get to. I think I've seen a lot of people that would do the studying on being self-reflective or reading philosophy, and they think they know it, but it seems like you're actually applying it and making a difference in your own life. And you were mentioning how this changed your career trajectory. I'd love to get to that here in a minute.
Yeah.
Before we do, would love to help, if you could break down for the audience here what your personal journey has been, starting with how you grew up and maybe some of the values you gained as you grew up.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from an Indian household, and Indian households, we typically have big families. So family for me was a big thing growing up. Both my parents have around 5 to 6 siblings plus. Each of those have their own children. So I had lots of cousins growing up around me. So growing up, I grew up in a very traditional household. I have a younger sister and lots of family. So family values were embedded for me very early on. And where I live as well in the UK, so I live in a place just outside of London called Slough. And lots of my family members also live here. So growing up, you go to each other's houses, you're kind of all around each other. And my father, who originally was from India and he came to this country, because growing up in a slightly difficult circumstances in India, education was very important to him, and it was very necessary in that country in order to progress. So I had that similar mindset growing up as well, that education is very key. You need to follow this conventional path of school, progressing really well. Your grades dictate success, because growing up for my father and others around him, that was the case back then. So for me, my journey was always, right, I'm going to work hard at school. I had fun. I enjoyed myself. I was a class clown as well, but it was always very focused on, I need to achieve these results because that will equate to future success. So yeah, growing up, it was very much a case of success at school was important. Then I went to university. I went to a university called Aston, which is based in Birmingham in the UK, in the Midlands. I was more from South. This was more in the Midlands. And I think that same mentality followed me there as well, that this is a really important step. It's going to dictate my future success. And that probably culminates in a bit of additional pressure that you put on yourself throughout that time, because you associate academia success with future success. And as you said, we'll come on to career in a second. And that typically then floats into your career world as well, that same pressure that you apply on yourself. So yeah, growing up, I think, to answer your question, values were very much around family, collaboration, love, and all those wonderful things. But there was definitely an element of driven success and you need to achieve in this environment.
Oh, wow. It's almost a little conflicting when you have this community love set of values, but then you have this you must achieve, which feels a little bit opposed to that. So as you were entering the workforce, I'm reading the situation a little bit here, but as you got into the workforce, what was that experience like for you?
So I think I consider myself very fortunate in my career. So I as I mentioned, I went to Aston University. In the UK, you can have 4-year courses or a 3-year course. The 4-year course typically has a work placement built in. So that was the avenue I went down. I was very fortunate to get an internship, a 1-year internship working at a global consulting, a leader, a management consulting firm. And so that was my first exposure to the workplace. I was still technically a university student, done my work placement in this world. And then I came back to finish my university degree. So because of that experience, I was able to then go back as a graduate. And that's when I first really kicked off my actual career. And I think for me, the transition was very much taking that same mentality into that new world. And when I say mentality, it was in education, it was very much a case of striving for success, driven, very focused view on how do I get that top mark. And then when you go into the consulting world and the corporate world, it's the same thing. It's how do I'm at this level now. How do I reach that level? And then how do I reach that level? How long will it take me? What's the quickest I can go there? So that was very much the transition of how do I achieve that success? How long is it going to take me? And I was very kind of linearly focused, if you will.
Oh, man. So how did that pan out over time? You were going on this linear path. I'll call it maybe climbing the ladder within the corporate consulting space. How did that evolve for you?
So it was a really interesting journey. I think in my career, I was very fortunate. I worked with so the company I worked for was a global leader. And because of that, they had lots of large transformational programs that I was a part of. So early on in my career, I got to work across the end-to-end project lifecycle of some exceptional programs and projects. So I've got real exposure, and I worked with some brilliant people as well. I think typically yourself being from a consulting background as well, you work with excellent people and you can learn from those people as well. So I love the learning. I love the insights that I got, but it was very much a case of, right, okay, how do I strive for that next level? And that's what I did. It was when I joined, it was very much a case of, right, I want to hit director. I want to do it in 10 years. Watch me go. This is what I'm going to do. And I kind of started on that trajectory when I got promoted quite early on. And then I strive for the next promotion. Right. How do I go for that one? And I think it's when I reached a senior consultant / early manager level, then I had a few difficult circumstances happening in my life. So I took some time out. I was at home for a little while. And that was almost a forced point of inflection, a forced point of reflection. And this is where I started to understand a bit more around those pillars of my life that I described earlier, that work is just one aspect. So I've gone from a very focused, driven individual to taking a step back and now thinking, right, okay. And the one question I asked myself, and this is the thing that changed everything for me, was I asked myself, why? Just why? That was a simple question I asked myself, because I knew what I was doing. What I was doing was what I've always done, which is be very driven, very focused. How do I achieve? How do I reach that next level? How do I kind of make people happy? How do I get the good reputation and that praise from everyone? But now I was asking myself what I'm doing. So not what I'm doing, but why am I doing what I'm doing? And I think, again, you have to be very honest with yourself. And the answer I got was quite a startling one for me. I guess when I asked myself, Shiv, why are you doing all these things? Why are you focusing 80, 90% in your career? Why? The answer I got was, you are insecure and you are seeking external validation. That was the kind of nuts and bolts of, that's the kind of one line summary of my 2-3 pages of analysis when I asked myself that question. But it was essentially, I'm striving for this goal, this thing, this next level, but there are never ending levels. And I'm striving for all this. And why? Because I'm seeking that validation. The title, the status, I wasn't driven by money, but the title, the status, that next level will give me a sense of, well done, validation, praise. And then I think you get caught in a cycle because there's no end to this work that you're going to do. There's huge companies, there's no end. So if you're doing amazing work to seek external validation, then you've set the bar. Then you've got to kind of smash that bar to receive the external validation again. So it's a constant cycle of giving and wanting this praise. So that was a big inflection point for me, that realization.
Yeah. Oh, man. As you're describing this, first off, it describes the hedonic treadmill perfectly. As you reach your next milestone, you think you're going to be happy, but no, you're still running as fast as you can for the next one and the next one. And you're never going to feel satisfied as long as you're seeking external validation. It's almost like running to the horizon. You'll never get there. You're always going to feel some sort of void inside. Okay, so you got to this point and you were wrestling with your why. It didn't feel right. What was your next step?
Sure. So I think at this point now in my career, I was performing well, and I knew that the next level is in sight. The next level's there. I can see it. I know there's a trajectory of how to get there. But the difference was now that drive that I had before was questionable. It was fading. And the reason why it was fading is because now what I'm doing and my why are not aligned. There's not an alignment anymore. There's a breakage that's happened because I've now become aware of what my why currently is. It's the wrong things. It's seeking validation, but that's not healthy. I did that in university. Now I'm doing it now. Before it was degrees. Now it's promotions. So at that point, I carried on working, I carried on performing, but it just didn't feel the same anymore. And what's ironic is then I've always been big on mentoring and coaching individuals in my career because I've received mentoring and coaching. So I love to give it. And people in my team, the juniors, I could see their drive and their kind of motivation, and it reminded me of myself back in that stage, right? So then I could see almost myself in these analysts that are coming up the ranks. And I think for me, I just realized that, okay, things are changing, but I didn't do anything about it. I was like, what do I do? I'm not sure. So I carried on working. It had been over a year. But now so I consider myself quite a spiritual individual. I like to project into the universe. And so now I'm projecting into the universe and it's ironic, you've got the moon and the earth behind you. So it feels fitting, but I'm now projecting into the universe that this doesn't feel right anymore. But I felt lost as well because I had realized that my career was my identity. Because I'm continuously striving, my career was, and these titles were part of my identity. If someone said, "Oh, tell me about yourself," I would say, right, I'm an X consultant at X firm working on X project, but that's not who I am. But it had become confused. Who I was had become confused in my identity. So when you have a misalignment between what you do and why, it doesn't feel right anymore. I felt very lost. So I'm now projecting this energy into the universe. We're in COVID times. And last year in COVID times, when we're in lockdown, all the glamour of the consulting world and the corporate world is taken away because I'm now at my desk in my room. My bed is behind me. My clothes are on the floor. All the glamour is gone, right? So you're kind of forced to either continue or actually take a step back and really do something about this. So at that point, I decided, right, now is the time to take a step back and to leave. So I guess at that point in my career, what I realized was I can always carry on in this path. I could even come back to this path. However, the longer I stay in this world and if I reach that next level, then it's going to be harder and harder and harder for me to try something new. And I don't want to live with a regret of, oh, should I have tried this? I wish I tried this. So at that point, after giving that energy to the universe, a couple of signs, a couple of opportunities were presented. So I decided, right, now is the time to take a step back, try something new, essentially take a leap of faith in myself and then see what happens next. So it was quite an unknown. I didn't have anything set up, but I just knew it felt right. And if there's anything I've learned in the last year and before, it's we're educated individuals. We've been gone through the ranks at university. We've learned so much in our careers, but that's to our detriment sometimes. We use our brain far too often and our logic. Actually, sometimes you need to turn this off and use your gut a bit more. And my gut was screaming that try something new. Now was the time. So yeah, that's what I did. That's the point where I left my career last year.
Oh man. Oh, let's break this down a little bit. I have one question though. As you were deciding to make this leap into the entrepreneurial world, doing your own thing, what was going through your mind? Were you looking for that entrepreneurial business to be a certain compensation? Did it have to have certain features for you to do that? Or was this truly a leap of faith where I will figure this out as I go?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the circumstances vary for everyone. I'm unmarried. I don't have children. So I guess the risk for me was a lot less than perhaps others who are waiting to bring their side hustle to the same point as their career, for example, and then take the leap. So my circumstances were very unique to myself. And they were that the company I was working for announced that they were going to make redundancies. And I knew that my area of the business was performing well, as was I. So I'm unlikely to be impacted by redundancies. But I applied for voluntary redundancy. That was my route. I applied for a voluntary redundancy. So yeah, because I don't want to glamorize leaving your job and then you have nothing. So I left with a small compensation package that I knew would cover me for a couple of months whilst I figure out what I want to do. So that was my buffer. My buffer was a few months, but the reality was I had nothing to jump into at that point. I had nothing lined up, nothing planned. I just knew that there was an opportunity here, where I have a small buffer, which is better than no buffer. So to answer your question, that was the circumstances for me. However, I appreciate for others, they may wait until their side income is delivering a certain monetary value. What I would say to that is there's no right or wrong way of taking the leap. However, often the way that the process to get to the outcome of I will wait until I hit a certain amount is using your brain. You're not using your gut as much. And of course, we need to apply reason. And if you've got mortgages, etc., you have to think about all these things. However, if you just listen to your gut a bit more and really ask yourself, am I here daily doing this, waiting for an X milestone or X period of time that may or may not come, by the way? Or do I just take a step back, try this, and if it doesn't work out in 6 months, then go back? So then you've got two options. It's, do I take a break from my career, try it for X period of time? If it doesn't work out, go back to my career. Or do I stay in my career, try and build this thing in X period of time, and if it works, then jump off? The periods of time can be the same. It's just two different approaches of how you go about it, because we will always be, people may disagree, but I believe that we will always be able to get another job, go into another career, because we're highly desirable. We've built up all experience. So I think sometimes we operate in fear, perhaps as well, that, oh, if I left and I tried this and it didn't work out, then I would never be able to find anything again. I personally feel that that wouldn't happen because of all the experience you've built. You're desirable. And that's where let go of fear a bit more and have a bit more faith in yourself and your abilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And you come from a background of management consulting, which is one of the most diverse, applicable job types. You can go to almost any industry after that. A lot of our audience comes from the technology world too, whether it's cybersecurity or analytics or IT. And those skills are going to be required for decades and decades until the machines fully take over, which may never happen, but may. The whole idea is that they're going to have that same set of opportunities. It may not look the same, but they're always going to be desired. So one thing I've found in talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, and would love your take on this, is it's never going to be the right time. It's like having a kid. You're never quite ready, but you're ready enough, right? And if you can get some basics in place, like coverage for a few months, 6 months or so for the ability to pay rent, pay the mortgage, whatever it might be, but making a leap to a new industry, to starting your own business, something drastic is likely the forcing function for your own growth. Until you put yourself out of your comfort zone and force yourself to do something that is incredibly difficult, you don't know truly what you're capable of. So would love to understand if something like that has resonated with you, and generally, how has the experience been since you've had your own business?
Yeah, sure. No, it's a great question. Actually, before I answer that, just something you touched on before around technology is in technology, especially, people are constantly reinventing themselves. The technologies that were relevant 10 years ago are no longer relevant now. People are now thinking about AI, machine learning, data analytics. So even there's no risk, there's no safety even within your corporate career, right? You're still going to have to reinvent yourself. So whether you leave and reinvent yourself here or stay, still have to reinvent yourself. You still have to take risks. But to answer your specific question around being uncomfortable and that being a driver for change, I think absolutely that was the case for me. So in the story now, I've just left my career. It's end of September last year, so basically a year ago. I'm in October now, 2020. And now I'm like, right, what do I do? Where do I go? And I think one thing I realized straight away was that I had taken that same fixed mindset into the new entrepreneurial world, because before I thought, right, how do I reach the top? How do I get there? And now I'm thinking, right, I'm an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur means hustle culture, means work 24/7, means I have to be the next Gary Vee, means I have to be the next Elon Musk. How do I create Uber? How do I create Tesla? So it was almost that same mentality in a new world, which wasn't healthy either, because now I'm obsessing about how do I start? What do I do? How do I kick this new thing off? People are coming to me with ideas and I'm flickering between different things of what I can do. And I think it's at this point I realized, first of all, there's a very big power in self-reflection, because in the technology world, we talk about technology, machine learning, data analytics. Well, actually, we have so much data on ourselves. Do we analyze that data on ourselves? And the answer, well, for me, it was no. So I took a step back and I mapped out my whole career and I said, what did I like? What didn't I like? What people did I like to work with? Which people didn't I like to work with? And why? And from there, I was able to derive a list of almost attributes and values. And from there, I was able to derive my why, the thing that drives me, the thing that, like people say, the thing that lights them up or gives them flow. Now, once I had defined my why, the thing that I enjoy, that lights me up, now I wasn't flittering around between different ideas, because that why became a criteria. So if I have 10 different ideas in front of me, or people come to me with 10 different things that I could do, I immediately can discount 5 of them because they don't align with my why, rather than being tempted into things that perhaps are not really the things I want to do, but I'm tempted by the money or the whatever it may be. So that was the first thing about being uncomfortable, is you're forced to go inside and you're forced to reflect on yourself, because there is no path now for you. You're in the wilderness. There is no path. There is no road. So you have to create your own road. And the way to start that is by going inside and figuring out your why. So that was a big thing for me. And I think the next thing about being uncomfortable was, I'm now thinking, okay, I know my why. I know what I want to do. I know where I want to go. And I've still got that fixed mindset of how do I go from step 1 to step 100? And I think the single biggest learning for me in that process was, I'm trying to go from step 1, which is I've left my job, to step 100, which is set up the next big thing. But I'm trying to take a huge leap in a very binary straight line. And that step 100, that end goal, is based on what I think I want. And that's based on what I know today. But I'm learning new things every day. I'm learning something new from talking to you. So if I'm going to learn something new every day, then that end goal will keep changing because it's based on new information. So why am I obsessing about this end goal that I think I want, that's only relevant today, that may change tomorrow? And why am I trying to jump in a binary straight line? It doesn't work like that. By the time I get there, it'll be very different to the end goal will be very different to what I thought it was. So the single biggest learning for me was, rather than trying to jump, take one meaningful step at a time. And the word meaningful for me is use your brain a bit less and use your gut a bit more, and be vulnerable, open yourself up to the universe. And that was the biggest thing I did in this new world of being uncomfortable. I just started putting myself out there. This is how I met you, Matt. Started to have random conversations with people from around the world, talk to different people, open myself, start posting content. And it's amazing that when you start opening yourself up to the world and not operating in this bubble, because the corporate world, your job is a bubble, right? And I lived in that bubble, but now I'm in the big world, which this exists within. Then you take all these new learnings and actually you start to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. It starts to flow a bit more rather than take a leap. And for me, that was it. I just said, let me just take one meaningful step at a time. On that new step, assess the variables around me through these conversations, through the inputs I get. And then, does this feel right? Or where's the next logical step? So that first step for me was, okay, rather than trying to set up the next Uber or Airbnb or Tesla or whatever, what's the next step for you? And I thought, right, okay, well, I really enjoyed consulting. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed helping businesses and helping people. Why don't I set up my own consulting company? That feels like a good next step. So that's what I did, set up my own consulting company. Then it was, okay, why don't I start looking for potential contracts and pieces of work that may exist? But at the same time, operate in this world. Don't just do it in my own bubble. Operate in the world and have conversations with people. And the contract that I landed was through a conversation with someone that I had never met before, that we had a dialogue with. And I landed a 9-month contract with that individual, helping a kind of huge public sector entity in the UK. It was one of the biggest roles I've done to date, and it was independent. So it just shows that the power of being uncomfortable is broad because it forces you to go inside, it forces you to look at new places on the outside, and it forces you to follow your gut rather than just predefined logical path that's set in front of you.
Yeah. As you're describing it, I was thinking of the stock market. While there's these ebbs and flows, it's not a linear path over time. If you trust it, though, and you keep investing, it goes up into the right. It goes on a trajectory that feels right inside, but you have to trust that it's going to take a lot of twists and turns along the way. And you have to let go, almost surrender yourself to what the universe can give you. Yes, you have to take action. Yes, you have to have some sort of aim, but you can't be so rigid that it confines you and just stops all of your progress.
Absolutely.
So with your business here, Shiv, it's Emerge. Tell us about Emerge and what you're aiming to do with that company.
Yeah, sure. So again, it goes back to different steps. And for me, the first step was, right, I personally gained so much experience in my consulting career, helping some of the world's leading companies, that for a big global consulting firm, I now want to do that on my own and take my own individual skill sets to help more companies, or even in the public sector as well. So that was my first step. So that's my first pillar, I guess, of the business, is that I want to continue helping global leading firms in the UK and abroad with their business transformation. That's pillar one, which is similar to what I've been doing before. But I think the new pillar for me, pillar number two, was also in the UK especially, 99% of the businesses are small, medium enterprises, or SMEs. And these SMEs, they don't know what consulting is, or they don't have access to leading class consulting expertise and management consulting, because typically these big firms work with global leaders, right? So they don't have access to these insights. And in my career, it was for my dad, in fact, who owns a law firm. Early on in my career, I started just helping him with basic problem solving. And I realized early on, taking those basic principles that we learn and apply to big firms to a small, medium company, that the value is astronomical, because they're such a small firm. So therefore, this kind of built a desire which grew. And when I started Emerge, I am also working with a series of small, medium businesses and helping them figure out their end-to-end business strategy. What's not working today? Where do they need to go tomorrow? How do they get there? And again, the growth and the value that I've seen for these firms has been astronomical. So right now, the focus is on continuing what I've been doing before, which is helping large scale business transformation, but also growing and transforming SME companies and small, medium enterprises. And I see that as a big pillar that I want to continue growing in the future of the business as well.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Like you said, a lot of these small and medium-sized companies don't have access to the big-time talent that is concentrated in large management consulting firms, other specialty boutique type entities. So you're giving them the opportunity to access those sorts of insights in a way that they hadn't before. So as you are now a year into this business with Emerge, you're helping the small and medium enterprises of the world. Help us understand some of the joys and some of the hardships of being out on your own.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So I think the joys have been that there's no path. There's no path, and there's no limit to what you can achieve. I think I had been previously conditioned in the corporate world and university, I guess, as well. It's that to get to this stage takes X period of time, it's almost an equation, takes X expertise. You need to gain these different parts of the equation to get to this outcome. I think with Emerge in this world of entrepreneurship, there is no limit, there is no path. So it's actually been quite scary, because we used to operating in a limited kind of scope, but actually everything is now limitless. So you have to yourself become limitless. So that's something I'm still trying to, I guess, do and shift my mentality within and remove my own limits and my own mental my own kind of mental barriers. So I guess that's one of the joys. I think one of the challenges has been, what do you do next? So for example, I've just finished up a project for the last 9 months. And right now I'm thinking about some of the things I could do next and evolve. So if I was back in my career and I had just finished a project, I would now be on the bench waiting for another one. But I know that I'm safe. I know that something's going to come along, something's going to come my way. The scary thing now, and I guess the opposite of the joy, the kind of the anxiety or the frustration is that how do you get that next thing? What do? You have to kind of now feed yourself and seek those things yourself. So it's the joys is that it's limitless, but the challenges is that now there is no, you can relax and something will come your way. You have to actively seek it out. So I guess that's the two sides of the coin.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned the word pathless. It actually reminds me of someone who's in a similar situation. His name is Paul Millard. He is an American now living in Taiwan. He was a former consultant. He has a website called Think Boundless, and he's actually writing a book, I think, called The Pathless Path, where it's about once you jump into that entrepreneurial world and you start to understand what you're all about and test what you're capable of, you really lean into that and you have all these new experiences come about. And yes, there's going to be hardships. You are feeding yourself or your family, and you have to figure out where food is coming from next. But you also are unconstrained. You have this pathless opportunity where you can blaze your own path left or right, and you're not confined as to what will be given to you next by a corporate system. So there's goods and bads, obviously, but I'd love to hear that you're exploring that pathless nature and finding that it really resonates with who you are.
Absolutely. And alongside that pathless thing is I've now discovered that I have a personal brand. That's something I feel like I didn't have before, because I talked earlier around my identity was associated with my career and my job, etc. And I think in the same way, my personal brand, Shiv, was my work brand. It's the person at work. It's the person who I think I am in my career and who I need to be. Who do I need to be on my projects and at work, etc. But now I've left my career, I've gone inside and I've figured out what my why is and where do I want to go. I've realized the importance of a personal brand, right? Because actually that's the thing that stays with you throughout your career, and it's very different to your work brand. There can be similarities, of course, but your personal brand is authentically who you are. And if you have a why, then your personal brand is the voice that communicates that why. And I think through this process as well, that's been a joy as well, figuring out that I have a personal brand. And I've become active on social media in the last few months as well, because I've realized I now have a responsibility to communicate that voice and to develop that personal brand and meet new people and add to that personal brand and evolve it and shape it. It's a piece of clay that I've now got that I'm constantly shaping, evolving, adding to. Whereas I don't think I had that before. I just had this work brand. Shiv was X person at X firm at X level. So that's also been a big point for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, so in working with a lot of my coaching clients, they have the same phenomenon going on where they have their professional self and their personal self, and they feel very distinct. And that's one reason why they come to me in the first place, because it's too difficult to go on like that. And they're putting too much energy into the professional self, and it feels so different from who they are authentically. I think the more that you embrace the idea of a personal brand and get closer to those two being one, they don't have to overlap completely, but the more you're in alignment with being who you are at work, that is when you start to feel really good about waking up every day. In reality, that's also where you get a lot more of the great opportunities in life, the better relationships, the better job opportunities, whether that's within corporate or whether that's in a entrepreneurial setting. So I'm glad you said that. A lot of people don't actually go after personal brand because it feels like something reserved for the executive core or people that own their own businesses. It's certainly something that we should all lean into to some extent.
But I love what you said about them two being connected and close together, because over the last 9 months, I've been working with people who I haven't met in person. I haven't physically seen them in person. But I've had such an amazing relationship with them. I've just been myself. We've had a good time. We've had really good conversations. And actually, my point of reflection, at the end of this period has been, was I ever authentically myself at work in my corporate career for those 8-9 years, or was I trying to live a persona? So absolutely, I agree. If you can authentically be yourself, first discover who you are, then be that person at different environments, then that's freedom, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have that inner conflict. I imagine that creates all sorts of problems, sleeping and stress and anxiety. And that goes to my next point of you're very outspoken on mental health and for very good reason. Would love to understand some of your history and why you focus on it so much.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing. Thanks for bringing it up because I think mental health for me is quite a really important factor. Actually, I mentioned how when I took a step back in my career and I just thought about the different pillars of life, it was in a time of hardship. And you spoke earlier around being uncomfortable and sometimes taking a leap of faith to which leads to growth. I think sometimes it's the same when it comes to mental health in that you only realize it's important when you're in a difficult position or when you're in a difficult stage of life. So yeah, for me, when I had a lot going on at home and with my parents were both unwell at a point in time, and there'd been a few deaths in the family, and so it really affected my mental well-being, and I took some time out, and that made me realize the importance of being healthy on the inside in order to perform well on the outside. And even small things, not that it's to do with mental health, but just small things, especially for men, that I shaved my hair off at the beginning of this year because it was starting to thin. And that was something that was really, really bothering me. It was just something very small, but it was really bothering me. And I shaved my hair off. And then I mentioned it once or twice online. And the amount of messages I got from other guys that said, look, I can't believe you don't, this has been on my mind for so long. My hair's thinning. I don't know what to do. I'm struggling. And I was like, wow, men internalize a lot of issues, right? And it could be big issues at work, it could be big issues at home, or it could be the smallest things. But I think the common thing is we internalize a lot of things. And I realized that when I spoke about a few small topics, so many people came flooding my way about their struggles and their challenges. So that's why I'm a big advocate for mental health, and especially men's mental health, because it resonates with me, because I've been in that position. And I found that as I speak about certain topics, a lot of people come opening up and talking about their own struggles. So they just need an outlet, I guess.
Yeah. And you and I both have a management consulting background. I would love your take on what do people in the consulting industry need to consider with mental health? What specifically about being in that world is challenging?
I think when people go into consulting, I think it is very glamorized. And it was for me when I joined as well, right? Because I'm from a small town outside of London, just on the outskirts of London. And I barely drank coffee. I drank tea. And then when I came to London, there's like 50 types of coffee. I was like, oh, well, what's going on here? And I think when you join the consulting workforce, it's very glamorized. It's big buildings, flashy laptops, all these things. And it's cool. It's very cool to work on a project out of town and to go to new places to work on all these big transformations. And it becomes the norm very, very quickly to work crazy hours, and very difficult projects and produce outputs and always say yes. That becomes the norm. So I think early on in your career, because it's the norm, you don't really set many boundaries. You're boundaryless in some ways, and you just accept a lot of the things that come your way. And that's okay to learn and grow. You have a steep learning curve. But as life evolves, as life changes, if you're still operating in that same way, it will start to burn out on your mental health. So the piece of advice or the thing I would say to people is, yes, dive in. Yes, go for it. Yes, learn. But just first of all, understand this is a very tough life. It will consume a lot of energy. And two is have some clear boundaries, because it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Yes, in a sprint, you can go all out and spend ages recovering after, but you're going to be doing this for a while, and you need to perform at that level. You can't have a peak of performance and then dip. You're going to have to keep performing at that level. So set boundaries that allow you to keep going that way.
Yeah, I love that. And the challenge I see in consulting is that the mental health issue and the need for improving it is global at this point. Every big company understands they need to be advocates for it. So you see a lot of top-down messaging on have a smart work-life balance, work smarter, not harder, protect yourself with your boundaries, right? So we hear that. But then what really matters is your local teams and how their norms are. And if those leaders in your specific teams aren't modeling boundary protection, deep work time, other things that are just good for work and life, then you just get sucked into it. So I really point back to when you're in a specific team, try to nurture that little culture with your leadership and make sure that those leaders understand the importance of modeling good work-life balance and appreciating mental health. Because if they don't, everyone gets sucked back into the craziness, and that's no way to live.
Yeah, it's a great point. I remember when I was a consultant going on manager, and I used to send emails at very late times and just whenever. And one of my leaders said to me, Shiv, don't do that. Just wait until the morning if you're going to send it, because you sending emails at 10, 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock starts to create the expectation that others need to be doing it at that time. And I didn't realize that. So it's always good to have that external kind of influence, but also if you just reflect and say, actually, am I modeling those behaviors? Because if you're not, then you're not going to create that subculture within your team, as you put it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'd like to turn a little bit towards rapid fire questions if you're game.
Okay.
What do you think, Shiv?
I'm up for it.
All right, let's roll. So I like to ask about best piece of advice, whether it was long ago or recent. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I think the best piece of advice I've received is a detached attachment. And what I mean by that is we live in this world, we live in this materialistic world, enjoy the things that we have around us, use them, enjoy them, but don't become attached to it. Don't become attached to the titles. Don't become attached to the money. Don't become attached to the objects. Use them, enjoy them, but they're not who you are. You are deeper than that. That's probably the best piece of advice I've received.
No, I love that. Let it inspire you and use it, but don't let it consume you and drive you.
Absolutely.
What about the worst advice you've ever received?
So this may be controversial. I don't know what your opinion is, but for me, the worst piece of advice I've received is say yes to everything. And typically I've heard that from like directors and top at the hierarchy level. Say yes to everything in your career. Say yes. Actually, I think that's inefficient, and you'll burn yourself out and you won't have focused growth. You'll just be a bit all over the place. Say yes, but to the right things, not to everything. That would be my one piece of advice, because pretty soon those 9 pillars of your life, you'll just have one pillar because you're saying yes to everything. So that's the one for me.
Couldn't agree more. And I really admire especially junior folks that are just starting their career and have the wherewithal to ask tough questions or say no. That is a sign of maturity. And I'm like, those are the types of people I want to be around, because they're inquisitive. They're not just trying to notch all those external accomplishments and impress people, but they have an internal drive and a self-awareness. And those are the types of people I think you and I like to be around.
Absolutely. You grow from everyone around you. Absolutely.
If you could invest early in a company, which one would it have been? Any company that exists today?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think probably a lot of people would say this answer, but for me, it's Google. And I think the reason being is just because I love their products that we use. I'm on Chrome right now. I use Google Drive. I love the products they use. They're so usable. And there are other things that they own as well, like YouTube, WhatsApp, etc. I just love them as a company. So I think Google is going to be here forever. And if I could have gotten early, we wouldn't have needed to work, Matt. We could just be living off the returns of that.
Truly. And as a cybersecurity person, I must say that they are making a lot of improvements in the last couple of years, because they monetize attention and access. Absolutely. And they didn't have a privacy focus in the past, but it's been getting a lot better recently, turning off like third-party cookies and everything. Yeah. So it's all heading in the right direction, but Google has been life-changing. I agree. One last question for you on the rapid fire sense. If you were starting your career today in 2021, we've made our way through much of the pandemic, hopefully. What advice would you give to yourself?
I think the one piece of advice I would give to myself is learning from my own experience is don't just go into this world, the working world, the consulting world, and get consumed in it and just follow wherever you're set. Have a bigger vision in mind. This is a process, but have your own vision where you want to get to, whether it's in that world, your own business, whatever it may be. Don't lose sight of that overall vision, because then if you have that, you can use your career to get the things that you want out of it and that you need out of it. So it's mutually beneficial rather than just going wherever your career takes you. So I think it would be that. And in that process, We talked about it earlier, your work brand, your personal brand. Be your authentic self. Don't feel like you need to conform to this certain persona. I did that so many times. You feel like you need to be, an analyst should be like this, a consultant should be like this, a manager should be like this. Be your authentic self, because then you'll develop real relationships, unique relationships that aren't just based on a superficial level. They have that deeper intimacy because you are being true to yourself. So have a bigger vision, and on the way to getting there, be your authentic self.
That's a durable career. I love that. A few last things to wrap up with, Shiv. I like to always ask, first off, how do you rise each day?
Good question. And this is something I've been doing for the last year or so. But when I wake up in the morning, I do 10 minutes of meditation. I then pray. I have a prayer. And then recently I've tried to do a few up to 5 minutes of visualization. That's something that I've incorporated into my life as a new thing. But meditation and prayer have always been there for me.
Love that. Where can people connect with you more online?
You can find me I'm on Instagram. LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can search. My name's Shiv Singh. My full name, as you know already, it's a bit confusing, but Harmeet Shivraj Singh. I'm sure we'll add a link somewhere. But yeah,
we'll get it in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I've also, through the company, I've set up Emerge. I've got Emerges on Instagram as well, so emerge.mc, and on Facebook as well, at emergemc.co.uk. And I have my own website as well, emergemc.co.uk. So yeah, feel free to add me on those. I think my primary platform is probably LinkedIn, and then I like to stay active on the other channels as well. It's where I met you, Matt, so I have to like LinkedIn. So
LinkedIn's good. Yeah. I mean, just a sidebar, there's a lot of ability to connect with people in deep and meaningful ways. We met by first starting on LinkedIn, then we had one-on-one Zooms, and now here we are trying to give a little bit of wisdom that we have in our heads to the world. Yeah. So this is lovely. Let's keep it up.
Yeah, it's been a huge learning about just connecting with people on social, because if you're in your own bubble, you're limited. There's only so much growth and so many accomplishments you can achieve. So yeah, whether it's with me or whoever, just reach out on social, speak to people. And I think I've learned through my interactions is just give value, and people will naturally want to speak to you. They will naturally want to come back to you. Don't feel like, oh, I'm only going to say A, B, C. No, just give value endlessly and just speak to people with the objective of just giving, and you will actually receive a lot more. And I've learned that. So selling for me now, sales is just giving value, and sales will come, or relationships will come, rather than trying to plot, how do I sell or how do I create a relationship? So yeah. So if you're speaking to me, my objective is to give you value. That's my objective.
Couldn't have said it any better, Shiv. What closing message would you like to leave with our audience today?
I think the closing message is, when I left my career, I looked for a lot of answers on the outside and on the external. What I realized, and I guess the message for everyone is just, the answers lie within. Go within, self-reflect. The answers lie within. The external conversations, stimuli, they're just signposts to what exists within. So use those things, but the answers are within. They're not in another course. They're not in another book. Read that book, but use it don't try to look for answers. Try to look for signposts within. And then the final bit is just listen to your gut a bit more. Don't always just keep listening to your brain. Listen to your gut a bit more. It's divine. It's telling you something. Don't ignore it over conditioned logic and fear that's been built into our brains.
Powerful. This is something we don't hear a lot in the technology world. It's not a lot that we hear about in the consulting world. When you follow your gut, as you say, Shiv, and you start to explore that intuition and really see what you're capable of and just give value to people, the returns are obviously beneficial. And I can't wait to see where you go over time. And let's stay connected as we both grow here. Appreciate the time today, Shiv.
Sure. Thanks very much, Matt. And take care, everyone. Take care.
This is your host, Matthew Doan. Thank you for listening to the Rising Digital Leaders Show. Again, my mission is to help you elevate your career as a digital leader and live a thriving life. I hope this episode sparks new thinking and helps you take meaningful action in your world. If you enjoyed the experience, I'd be so grateful if you subscribed and left a 5-star review. That's it for now. Until next time, my friends, stay virtuous.